Okay. According to the Mandamar that says that davar hagarim l'mamon, which means that even though something is not mine, but it causes me to pay money because I'm responsible for it, it's like mamon. We'll see the case in a second, right? So then that makes sense. According to the Mandamar that says that it's not really like money, it's not really like it's my money. So then how is that consistent with what we're saying over here that it's us, or the where it says Shani Hacha the Omar lo yimatz? Over here is different because there's an extra pasuk teaching you that it's us or lo yimatz. Okay, some say exactly the opposite. Right, it makes sense only according to him. Hainu, that's why you need the pasuk. Hainu de itzrich. We're turning to the Vav Amar Aleph. Hainu de itzrich. Lo yimatz. That's why I need the pasuk because regularly he holds that it would not be a problem. However, right? Lo yimatz lamali. Why do you need the pasuk of lo yimatz? Right? Anyway, he holds davar garm moment is kimamain. What's the case of davar moment is kimamain? So Rashi brings it on the top over here on Davav. He says the case is it's going to gabi goinev kachim shahayu bailim. Good morning. Gabi goinev kachim shahayu bailim chayav machar yusan. That the case is that kachim doesn't really belong to you, right? However, it's kachim that you're chayav machar yusan. Right, because you're responsible for it. So if it gets lost, so you would have to pay. Now says Reb Shimon, afal pisha ein kefel lehekdesh, even though there is no din of kefel lehekdesh. Let's say someone steals 50 stuff from a regular person, you have to pay double, right? Kefel. What?
I can say anything.
Oh, but if you steal from hekdesh, you're not chayav kefil because the afal pish ein kefil hekdesh tiksiv lirei ehu v'lei lehekdesh. We learn now that you have to pay yishalem shenaim lirei ehu. The pasuk says by kefil you have to pay twice kefil to your friend, but not to hekdesh on the top of that vav amar. Right. So why hacha still chayav over here in the situation of hekdesh you would be chayav? Why? The kevon dezeh chayav b'achar yisai, since there's a person who is chayav in the responsibility of this hekdesh, so therefore he's considered a gairem. It's considered a gairem for mamoin. So therefore, karinin bei re'eu karinin bei, we call it re'eu. The hagaram leilis chayav mamoin. Right. So again, this is Reb Shimon's. It's a machlokes, but this is Reb Shimon's shita that he holds. Right. That even though regularly someone steals from hekdesh, you're not chayav. Right, we're in like the second Rashi. Even though when you steal from hekdesh, you're usually not chayav. But over here, since there's a person who's responsible for the hekdesh, so therefore it is like it belongs to a person, right? It's not just like it belongs to hekdesh; it's like it actually belongs to a person, and therefore, someone who steals from him would be chayav kefil. Why? Because it's a davar hagarim l'mammon, even though it's not his actual mammon. It's not mammon that actually belongs to a person because it belongs to hekdesh. But since there's a person who's responsible, and if it would be lost, this person would be responsible to compensate hekdesh, right? So therefore, regarding that, it is considered his, and therefore, if someone steals from him, he is chayav to pay the kefa, right? So that's the case of davar garem l'mammon. So asks the Gemara, and this is the kasha where we're holding right now. Asks the Gemara, according to the man, the Amar davar garem l'mammon is k'mamayin, right? So why, according to him, do you need an extra pasuk to teach you that if you're responsible for the guy's chametz, right? You're responsible for the guy's chametz. We're saying that therefore you can't have it in your house because if it just belongs to the guy, that's fine. But since you're responsible for it, that's a higher level, and therefore you can't have it in your house. Says the Gemara, why? Says the Gemara, why do you need a pasuk for that? It's pashat. If you hold always in kol Torah kula davar garem l'mammon is k'mammon, that means that since you are responsible for it, it will cause you to have to be chayiv to compensate the mammon if it gets lost. So it's like your money. So what do you need the pasuk, right? So it's just more since if it's still around, since if the chametz is still around after Pesach, on Pesach, the responsibility you have for this chametz, right, is that if it's around hadar be'ena, you have to give it back the way it is. You don't have to give it back in money. You give back the way it is, right? Therefore, lav birshusei, it's not considered like it's your rishus. Even though you hold over agar mammon is kamammon, that is after there's an actual chiyuv. After there's an actual chiyuv, someone steals it and he causes you money, right? He causes you to pay money, so therefore, that he's required to pay kefil, right? But over here, since if it just stays the way it is, you pay back the same exact one. So he thinks that maybe the gabe chametz, right? It's not considered that it's in your rishus, right? It's like mammon in the sense that it's like I'm a chayiv you mammon, but it's not necessarily considered like it's your rishus, that it's mamash in your rishus. Who said that it's mamash in your rishus? Mamash Malon, the pasuk that says yes, it's considered your rishus. Okay, bo minei me Rava. They asked a shaila of Rava. That also has to do with partial ownership with the god. Behema sarnoina, behema that behema of tax. As Rashi says, the king hamelech noitel isur min habehem. The king used to take a tenth of the behemoths min hatvua and from the produce. So behema sarnoina chayeves b'bchara ein chayeves b'bchara. The halacha is by b'chara. We learned in the beginning of Sechta B'charis that if a guy has partnership in an animal, right, you putter from b'chara. It has to fully belong. Kilikol b'char b'Yisrael, the pasuk says, right? If it belongs partially to a guy, you're putter from b'char. That animal's child, even if it's a firstborn, doesn't have kedusha, doesn't go to the kayin, right? So the question is behemas arnoina, right? I have my flock of animals, right, and it partially belongs to a guy because I have to give 1/10 to a guy, right? So now does that mean that really all the animals are now partially owned by the king, by a guy, and therefore everything's pater from b'chara? So chayeves b'chara and chayeves b'chara. So where it says kol echad dematzim misalik lebezuzi, at any point, if the way the tax works is that you can just pay it off with money, right? So loy kami boil on the chayev. The Gemara says that's pasha. That's not a shayla. Why the chayev? Of course he's chayev, because in that situation it's not pshat that the king has the chelik in the animal. No, there's no chelik in the animal. It's just a tax per animal. You're right. It's dependent on the animals, on how many animals you have. But it's not a chelik in the animal. Just you have to give a tax. It's a fee, right? But ki kami boilan. What's our shayla? In a situation where you can't just pay it off with money, you have to actually give the king one animal out of 10, right? So amrlahu ptura. Even in that situation, you're pater because taka the owner, the king owns a chelik. So the Gemara vatani chayeves. Do we say you're chayev? The Gemara says no. Hasam dematzim misalek. The brisa that says that you're chayev is a situation where you can be misalik, where you can give him money instead of it. So therefore you're chayev. Okay. Ikadamri. Some say Rava behemoths are not ptumar b'chara. Afal gav dematzim misalek. Behemoths are noina. The way we look at taxes, you're pater even though you could give him money, dematzim misalek. Right, it's still not a problem because still it's really considered that the king owns a chelik in the animal. The fact that you could give him money, right, doesn't mean that means you could buy him out, right? Pshat is you're buying him out. It's not pshat that it's just a fee. No, he has a chelik in the animals, right? But elamai, you could buy him out, right? But it doesn't mean that the king doesn't have a chelik in the animals. The king does have a chelik in the animals, and therefore you are pater from b'chayra. However, isas arnoina. Right. Let's say you have a tax that good morning. Let's say you have a tax that the king requires you to pay for dough. Let's say you're making bread, so you have to give a certain amount of dough, bread, right, to the king, to the government, whatever, right? So in that situation, it's a similar situation because the chiyuv challah is right. The chiyuv truma that you have to give from your bread, which is what we call the challah, right? That's you only chayiv if it fully belongs to a Jew, but if it belongs partially to a guy, also you're pater, right? Says the Gemara. So isas arnoina chayeves bechallah va'afal gavdoli misalik lei. Even in a situation where they won't accept tax, they won't accept monetary compensation instead of actually giving them bread, right? Even so, you're chayev. Why? Isn't that muchach that the guy actually has a chelik in the challah? Whereas in my time of behema is lekala, isa less lekala. The idea is that a behema, everyone knows, right, that the government is coming, right, and taking and takes right? Everyone knows the Gemara comes and takes an animal, so the people understand that the guy has a chelik in it. But Isa less they call it. But the fact that the government's taking from your dough, I guess that's not something that's right for some, and therefore people just see you eating challah, eating your bread without being mafresh challah, right? So that's something that happens more. I guess people don't realize that the reason why you're pater is because of the guy's, right. Okay. But an animal has a coil. The fact when a guy takes an animal, the fact that the guy's a partnership in the animal, right? That's something that has a coil. Okay. Tan Rabbanan. We're up to the two dots on Daf Yomi Aleph. Tan Rabbanan. Nachri shenichnas lechatzer shel Yisrael v'tzeka b'yadai. If a Nachri enters the house, the Chatzar of Israel, then he has dough in his hand. Ein zakuk levar, right? You don't have to get rid of it. It belongs to the guy, right? Why it's in his hand, right? However, if he put it by you, and he was mekabel achrayas, Rashi explains. I think Gemara is going to explain, right? So then zakuk levar, you have to get rid of it, like we said that if you mekabel achrayas for the chametz, you have to get rid of it. Right? Yichad lebayis ein zakuk levar. If you were miyached a house for the guy's chametz, you were miyached him a place, i.e., you rented him a place, right? So then ein zakuk levar. You do not have to get rid of it. Shenemar lo yumatze. Okay, the Gemara says Maika Amar. What's going on? What's the case of yichad lebayis? Amar of Papar Areisha Kai. Right, the Gemara says, when it's the case of yichad lebayis, right, is the case where you give him part of your house, well, you rent him a room or something, right? You're not going to be zakuk levar because now it's considered the guy's house, right? He rented it. Now the chiddush is that even if you're mekabel achrayas, right, and this is the way some of the Achronim speak out, is even Taisus, right? Even if you're mekabel achrayas, right? Even so, since the guy rented the place, it's not a problem. And it's regular. If you're not mekabel achrayas, right? So then even if it's in your regular pantry, it's fine. The way we sell our chametz to a guy, right? You're not mekabel achrayas for that, and therefore it's the guy's. Even if it's in your house, it's not a problem. Now that we're saying yichad lebayis ein zakuk levar, must be the chiddush of that case is that even if you are mekabel achrayas and you do have more of a connection to this chametz, still because you rented him a place and he designated him a place in the house, therefore it's still okay. And that's Rabbi Nutam's shita. Right? Pirush Rabbi Nutam da afilu Taisus yichad da afilu b'achrayas ma'arim shem hachim afik malo yimatzah da'chashiv matzah kemesh yichad lebayis, right? And that's how he understands what the issue of lo yimatzah is. Lo yimatzah is that it's not considered found in your house because it's not your house. Okay, well let's unravel this in the Gemara. My Amar, the Gemara says, Amar of Papa. What does it mean when we learn from the pasuk lo yimatzah? Areisha kai, saying it's going on the reisha. V'achakam hifkidoi etzloi zakuk levar. Shenemar lo yimatzah. Right? Rav Papa is saying that the pasuk of lo yimatzah is going back onto the reisha, which just says the regular case that if she's mafkid in your house, it's a problem. Right? The issue that the Gemara has is that the last case in the Brayso says yichad lebayis ein zakuk levar, right? Shenemar lo yimatzah. Lo yimatzah is an isser, right? So you can't. The pasuk of lo yimatzah is saying it's aser lo yimatzah, and so if the Gemara is bringing the pasuk of lo yimatzah, it sounds like it's saying an isser. But the last case in the Brayso that the pasuk is being brought on is a heter, right? So how do you bring the pasuk of lo yimatzah as a heter? So Zakter of Papa Areisha, it's going on the beginning. The first case where it's aser when hifkidei etzloi, right? And that's really what lo yimatzah means. V'achikama hifkidei etzloi zakuk levar. Shenemar lo yimatzah. Okay. Vashi Amar no. Le'el maseifa kai. V'achika Amar. This is what he means to say. Yichad lo yibayis ein zakuk levar. Shenemar lo yimatzah b'vateichem. It means the end of the pasuk. Lo yimatzah b'vateichem. Right. V'halav didehu. Right. And this, now that you miyached the goya bias, right? So then in that situation, it's not yours. So we mean to say lo yimatzah b'vateichem, right? Any chametz can't be found. Any chametz that you have achrayas for can't be found in your house, right? But if it's not in your house, because halav didei, because you gave the place to the guy, the nachri ki kamayel, when the nachri is bringing it, the beis din nafshei kamayel is bringing it to his own house. Okay, So that's how Rashi explains. Says the Gemara, Lememra deschiras kanya. Do you mean to tell me that schiras is enough of a kinyan, right? That now, because I rented out to the guy, so even if I'm mekabel achrayas, it's not a problem, right? Because I rented out my room or I rented out my apartment to a guy, so therefore a guy is allowed to have chametz there, even if I'm chay b'achrayas. Vatnan af b'makom shomer lahaskir, or even in the situation that we said you're allowed to rent out. This is a mishnah in Avodah Zarah, that even in a place that they said you are allowed to rent out property to a guy, leila based dira amru, not for regular living, only for stables and animals and storage, but not to live in. Why? Because the goyim taking Avodah Zarah, right? And the pasuk says, there's an issur to bring Avodah Zarah into your house. So you see, even if you rent it out, right? If you think schiras is kindness, what's the issue of the guy bringing in Avodah Zarah? It's considered his house because he rented it, right? Where it says, you're right. Really, schiras is not kanya, and therefore for Avodah Zarah it's a problem. But over here it's different. The Torah actually says lo yimatzah is mishim matzui biyadcha, right? That's something that's accessible to your hand. Right? So chametz actually has a kula, because chametz, in order for it to be chayiv, it has to be matzui biyadcha. Mashen ken by Avodah Zarah just says if it's your house, it's a problem. So schiras technically is your house. Okay. Amar Bihuda, Amar Rab. If you find chametz in your house on Yom Tif, kaifa alav es hakli, you should cover it with the kli, right? So that no one comes to eat it. Rashi says it's muktzah. It sounds like Rashi says, and the fact that again that you found it, are you oivei? You have to get rid of it. It's bal yirah and Pesach, right? So there's no bal yirah lo yavar the hal bitle believe it, right? The same theme that we've been saying all along is that there's a bittul here, right? And that on Erev Pesach and you say kol chamira, which means you're making kafir the ara. That's bittul. You're making mevatel it, right? So we explained it's at hefker. Is it als a new chiddush of a concept of bittul, which only works for Pesach als tashbisu, and it means to be mevatel miliboy. Whatever the mechanism of bittul is, the point is mevatel it. So therefore, even if you found something on Pesach, it's not really his. It's not over on it. However, someone might come to eat it, and if you eat it, avada, it's still usher, even though you were mevatel it, right? Because then it's ashvei. Right? It's still chametz. Everyone agrees it's still chametz. You can't eat it. The fact you're mevatel makes it not yours. The fact you're mevatel makes it not chashiv to you. Right? But avad, if you eat it, it's a realm. So therefore, in order for not to eat, you have to kaifel of a sikli. You have to cover it up. Okay. Amar Rava. If the chametz is anyway belongs to hektish, right? So then and it's you don't have to. My time. Right? So anyway, people know since it's hektish. They won't. I guess it's a situation where they know, right? So anyway, they know that it's hektish. They're not going to eat it, because, right? So you don't need to make an extra protection because anyway they're not eating. Fine. The chametz of a guy, you should make a hecker of 10 tfachim a mechitza, right? So that people won't come to eat it. The imshal hektishu and it's belongs to hektish. You don't have to. My time in middle the same halacha, right? If it's hektish, so anyway people are not going to eat it. Says Rabbi Yehuda Rav, if someone goes out, means someone goes to sea, like someone goes in a caravan, 30 days before Pesach, you're leaving already, right? You're going on vacation and you're not, whatever, you're on vacation, you're traveling, and you're not in your house for 30 days before Pesach, ein zakuk levar. You do not have to get rid of the chametz. You can have chametz that's in your rishus, and you do not need to be mevatel, right? Why? Zakt Rashi. I will see. Does Rashi explain it? Maybe further on he explains. Basically, the halacha is that. Okay, let's read a little more, and then we'll see it in Rashi. So right, so. If you leave 30 days before Pesach, you do not have to be in Mevar, right? But if he's going to be away on his does he have to do bittul still?
Or not? He's going to be away. He doesn't have to.
Midrabanan, we might say to do bittul, but I don't. Midrabanan don't do bittul. We'll see. Let's see. Within 30 days, you are chayav to do beer.
Even if you want to.
Right. Amar Abai says Abai. This said if you leave within 30 days, it's only if he's going to come back. But if he's not going to come back, even right, he's not at all going to come back. So then ain't zakuk levar. You do not have to be mevar. So Amar le Rava v'i daitei lachzar. What do you mean? Right. So basically, what Abai is saying is that within 30 days, if ain't daitei lachzar, ain't zakuk levar. Right. That means that before 30 days, if right, the situation of 30, what's the kula of within 30 of before 30 days is that even if you come back, you're still putter. Right? What's Abai saying? That within 30 days, the only time it's a problem, the only time we say it's a problem, even within 30 days, is only if you're going to come back.
Coming back, what's the difference?
This is Amalei Rava, the Idai Telach. So if you're coming back, Afilim Rosh Hashanah Nami, what are you talking about? If you're going to come back on Pesach, so there's an issue of Bali Roya, Bada. Right, which so now let's see Rashi. I feel Rosh Hashanah Nami, on the bottom, like 4 lines from the bottom. Dechi hadar baby mea Pesach over alei, ve'hi shaita lav b'shusehu delevatle. And then we're going to see a halacha that on Pesach you can't be mevatel. The halacha is that you can only be mevatel when it's yours. On Pesach it's not really considered yours, right? So therefore you can't be mevatel on Pesach. You have to be mevatel before Pesach, right? So if you come back from your trip and you find chametz, right? Lav, right? So which obviously we learn. Obviously Rashi is learning that he was not mevatel in Rosh. He was not mevatel before Pesach, right? It doesn't have to be mevatel before Pesach. Sharei Isur Hano ve'ein Shaloi, right? So now again he's coming back. He finds right, and he was not mevatel before. So it's an Isur Hano ve'ein Shaloi. Uchshirahu over alav, right? Right. Okay. So the next Rashi is where he explains the main thing. We didn't get up to it yet. The idea basically later on Chafalaf we have a mission that says that if you have chametz on a mapilas, chametz and a mapilas fell on it. Right. The house fell on chametz. Inaccessible. A wall fell over the chametz. Inaccessible. You don't have to be mevayer it. Right. You have no access. So it's considered gone. So too, someone who's not at home, who's far away. It's like a mapilas. It's the same situation. It's like it's inaccessible. It's not. It's really that's not the chametz that the Torah was talking about. You have to get rid of on Pesach, and therefore, so the Gemara says by mapilas you have to be mevatel. The Gemara does point out that avad you have to be mevatel by mapilas because maybe someone might undo the pile of bricks and find the chametz or something like that. But it sounds like from Rashi here. Right, exactly. It sounds like from here that if you're going away, you don't have to be mevatel it. And the sugya isn't talking about that you have to be mevatel it, right? Because Rashi's saying that if you come back on Rosh Hashanah, if you left Rosh Hashanah and then you come back on Pesach, you're going to be over. What do you mean? You're mevatel it, no? So Rashi, no, you were mevatel it. And on Pesach, you can't be mevatel it. So you see, Rashi learns, others argue, but Rashi learns that bittul here, that you were not mevatel it. That's you don't have to be mevatel it because there's no issue. It's Bishlam, I guess. Bishlam by the mapilas, right? Why that's right here, right? Someone might clear out the bricks, and you might actually. Therefore, you need to be mevatel it. But if you're talking in Florida, you're not coming back, so you don't even have to be mevatel it. That's what it sounds like from Rashi.
If you forget to sell it, and you go back to someone else, you can't eat it. It's
You mean after Pesach?
After Pesach.
Right. Chomet Shalva Pesach. Right. Exactly. Right. Fine. So Rava has a taina, right? He says, "What do you mean? If you're coming back, I feel in Rosh Hashanah Nami. Elam Rava Zakt Rava Hada Amat Kodim Shleishim Yom. This that we're saying before, and we're going to see where 30 days comes from. Hada Kodim Shleishim Yom Ein Zakuk Levayer Lo Yamoron El Shein Dat Lachzar. Right? Even before, the only time it's fine is if it's Ein Dat Lachzar. Well, Dat Lachzar. So then I feel in Rosh Hashanah Zakuk Levayer. Right? Even Rosh Hashanah you have to come back. Right? That's the Rava the time, and Rava is consistent with his own shita. If someone makes his house into an oitzar, right? Sagt Rashi, oitzer shehichnis sham tvua, v'tachtei chametz, and underneath is chametz. V'amrina lekaman, chametz shenafla olav mapilas hareo kimavur. Right? If mapilas falls on it, it's totally like it's destroyed. Right? So therefore, right? Ha'isa beitza oitzer kodim shloshim yom zakok levar. However, tayich shloshim yom within 30 days of Pesach zakok levar. Says the Gemara, v'kodim shloshim yom nami lo yamar el she'ein daita lefanoisai. Right? The only time before 30 days is not a problem if you don't have in mind to undo it. That's like daitay lachsar, right? Daitay lefanoisai means you're going to clear out the tvua and then you're going to uncover the chametz. It's the problem. And I feel even before 30 days before Pesach, it's still a problem, right? So same exact parallel halacha is not in terms of someone who leaves, but someone who just changes his house into a warehouse, and now again it's inaccessible, just like in our playlist. Now the Gemara said, where do these 30 days come from? What type of thing is this? 30 days you're chayiv? Kedetani Gemara says, like we have in a brayso, Shailim v'darshan Hilchas Pesach Kodem Pesach Shloshim Yom. Tanakama says that we start learning Hilchas Pesach 30 days before Pesach. Rishimon Gamliel Shtei Shabbos is 2 weeks before Pesach, right? So this is where it comes from, because there's a chiyuv to start learning Hilchas Pesach 30 days before Pesach. So therefore, the awareness for chametz is already for 30 days before Pesach. So the chiyuv b'dika is chal 30 days, right? But if it's before 30 days, no one's even thinking about, right? So probably this is a chiyuv d'Rabbanan, right? First of all, the idea of shalom v'darshan is chiyuv d'Rabbanan, right? And then the chiyuv of well, we'll see. The Gemara is going to bring psukim, right? But the idea that you're really chayiv and beer from then probably is a chiyuv d'Rabbanan, because even so, it should be just like a mapilas, even if you leave within 30 days, right? But the chachamim or mechayiv a bedika within 30 days. Okay.
We also say after 2 weeks is the criteria not or not.
Yeah, I think so. No. I think the Gemara is equating it to that din, right? Okay, so the Gemara says, my time is Tanakama. Why? How does the Tanakama know? Where does Shloshim Yom come from? Sharei, Moshe oimed b'Pesach Rishon, umazir al Pesach Sheni. Right, Shenemar. As Moshe was talking about, Moshe Rabbeinu was discussing, he was in Pesach Rishon. During Pesach Rishon, he talks about Pesach Sheni for the people who had to do Pesach Sheni because they were Tameh, and it's a month later in Iyar, right? So, the pasuk says, "Vayasu b'nei Yisrael as a pasach b'moyado." It's one of the only times in the pasuk when it's not an asnach, and it's not a safe pasuk, and it's still pasach. Whatever, that's how you pronounce it. Vayasu b'nei Yisrael as a pasach b'moyado. Right, uksiv. Right, so they make the Korban Pesach, and then a little further down in the parsha it says, "Uksiv v'yeh nashim shayu tameim l'nefesh adam." People who were tamei, they came to Moshe, they asked him, "What should we do?" And he said the whole parsha Pesach Sheni. Right, that you have a second chance to do the Pesach. So you see, a month before Pesach Sheni is when Moshe discussed the halachas. So too, a month before regular Pesach, the halachas of regular Pesach. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Amar Lacha, he said that's not a raya. Since we're talking about the things of Pesach, so we discussed the rest of the things of Pesach, but it's not that it actually happened over there. Right? It's not that it's not because it's 30 days. That's why Moshe discussed it over there. No, Stam. They happen to be discussing the issues of Pesach. I don't know if he holds that, right? Or it's not a raya. It's not a raya that you have to do 30 days before. It happens to be because they were dealing with Pesach, so they dealt with the rest of the things of Pesach. But it's not a blanket a rule. Right, that you have to do 30 days before Pesach. Now it says, "My time in Rabbi Shimon Gamliel." Where does he come from? 2 weeks. Where does that come from? Moshe was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan back in Mitzrayim, 2 weeks before Pesach. That's when he tells people about Pesach. Shenemar, hachodesh hazel lochem Rosh Chodashim. Uksiv, and it says, "Dabru el kol adas Yisrael leimor be'asor lachodesh hazel." On the 10th day of this month, v'yicholem isha lebeis avos alabayis. Right. And he starts telling them about, right? So obviously he's before the 10th day of the month, right? And because it says so he's assuming it's Rosh Chodesh, like the Gemara is going to say in a second. And then it's 14 days before Pesach, right? He's telling them about the Korban Pesach, right? So you see 2 weeks before. It says in who said it's Rosh Chodesh? Meaning, yes, a chodesh hazeh lochem rosh chodashim means that it's the first month of the year, right? The Nisan is the first month of the year. But who said we're on Rosh Chodesh today? Right? Right? Maybe it's on the 4th or 5th. All you know is that it's before the 10th, because he says, right? Really, I think there's a drasha that says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe the moon, right? So it was Rosh Chodesh, right? But I guess the Gemara is not. Yeah, that's what Taisus brings. Okay, let's see Taisus. Taisus asks the Gemara Menachas Sheniskasha Moshe B'Riyah Salavana Ad Sha'omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kazer Rev HaKadosh, right? So Rabbeinu Tam Afagav Sha'omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe B'Yishach maybe Moshe only told him later. Avad, the Gemara knows that Hashem told it to Moshe on Rosh Chodesh, but who said Moshe told it to Yisrael? Right? That we don't know when exactly he did it. Maybe he told him on. Then that's Gemara's kasha over here. Maybe he told him on the 3rd or the 4th. Right? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel has to bring a raya that Moshe started teaching it to Yisrael 2 weeks before. And how do you know that? Okay. Ela Maraba Barsimi Mishmei Deravina Mehach Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Midbar Sinai Bashana Sheinis B'Chodesh Rishon. Right? It says that Hashem spoke to Moshe Bashana Hashenis B'Chodesh Rishon, the 2nd year on the 1st month. Right, so you see again 2 weeks before. Says the Gemara, same kasha. What do you mean? We understand it was in the 2nd month, in the first month of the 2nd year, right? And then they did the Pesach. But how do you know it was same kasha? So no. We know it's Rosh Chodesh because it says midbar from. We learned the word midbar from it. Ksiv hacha b'midbar Sinai, ksiv hasam, and it says. I think this is the first pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar, right? 1:1, right? So it says Vaydaber Hashem Moshe midbar Sinai b'omed b'chol chodesh hasheni. Mala alon b'rosh chodesh because it's over there. It says the firish be'echad l'chodesh hasheni, right? Right, so must be it's Rosh Chodesh, and therefore we know, right, and therefore we know that it's 2 weeks. He taught them about the Pesach 2 weeks before the Pesach. Okay, says the Gemara, "V'nichtav b'reisha dechodesh rishon v'hadar nichtav dechodesh sheni." Right, basically, what we just showed over here is that the first pasuk in Bamidbar. Right, let's read the dates. Be'echad l'chodesh hasheni. Actually, then it ends b'shana hashenis. Right, so we're talking about the 2nd year, the 1st day of the 2nd month, which is Iyar. Right. If you go further, the pasuk we wrote before is later on in the Torah in Parshas Ba'al Yischa. Right, and over there it says b'chodesh harishon, b'shana hashenis b'chodesh harishon. Right. So why isn't that first? Nichtav b'reisha the chodesh rishon. First, we should say the Parsha of Pesach, what happens on Nisan, and then we should go back to the census that happened in the beginning of Parshat Bamidbar, right? Which is in the beginning of the Sefer. But that should be later because that happened in the 2nd month in Iyar. Amar of Menashe, famous line. Amar of Menashe, right? That the Torah is not necessarily in chronological order, right? Even though it's written a certain way, it doesn't mean that's the way it actually happened. Amar of Papa. We only say this in 2 separate parshias in the Torah. 2 separate parshias in the Torah, and we say that maybe this one happened first, and it was just placed, it was ordered differently. But in one place, but within one parsha, you can't say, right, that when you have a conversation between, within one paragraph, you're not going to say that Avada, it flips back and forth. And it's not in the right chronological order. And he'll prove it. Right? We have a rule that if you have a klal and then you have a prat, right? So then ein b'chlal al mashav prat. The halacha is that even though the klal is a generalization, but because a prat follows it, we say ein b'chlal al mashav prat. Right? We don't really look at the generalization. We say it's just the prat, just the specification, and nothing in the klal. If you say ein mukta mucha b'Torah, even within one pasuk, right, or within a series of psukim that are all next to each other, dilmu pratu klalhu, right? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's a prat and a klal. You're telling me ein mukta mucha b'Torah, right? So maybe, right, just like you're telling me that this happened first and then that happened, even though it's out of order. So too, klalu prat. You're saying the halacha, right? klal uprat has a halacha differently than a prat to klal, right? Like the Gemara is going to say, right? Two prat to klal, naisa klal moisif ala prat, right? The halacha is klal uprat ein machlal el mashe b'prat. But if you have a prat and then a klal, it's the opposite, right? It's naisa klal moisif ala prat. It opens up the prat. It generalizes the prat, right? So says the Gemara. Again, if you say in mukta mukhar b'Torah, even in one Indian, even b'chad inyana, so you can't learn pratu klals, right? Because which one is it? Is it this way? Is it that way? If order doesn't really make a difference, right? Now, what we have to wrap our heads around is that the Gemara over here is saying that we don't care about in mukta mukhar, but right, the klal pratu klal is not necessarily dependent on what the text says, right? It's how Hashem told it to Moshe. Right, and maybe Hashem told it to Moshe differently, right? Klal pratu klal, right, is not. I'm looking at the text and I'm reading the Torah and I'm trying to decipher based on the rules that we have called klal pratu klal what the Torah wants to be telling it to me. No, that's not enough. It has to be that we know that Hashem told it to Moshe this way. And if you're telling me ein mukta mukhar b'Torah, which means that the chronology is different, then maybe Moshe was told the prat first and then the klal first and then the prat, and we care about the way it was told to Moshe, not the way it was written in the Torah, right? So says the Gemara, obviously must be that in one Indian you don't say in mukta mukhar b'Torah, right? Right. So again, let's just read that. Right. Maybe it's not a klal prat. Maybe it's a pratu klal. So, right. So you don't have the rule of klal prat v'tu. And furthermore, if it's a pratu klal, so then naisem klal moisav ala prat. We have a different rule for that. Dilma klal, right? I'm sorry. V'tu pratu klal. If you have a prat and then a klal, and the halacha is that naisa klal moisif ala prat, dilma klal pratu, the same shayla the opposite way. If you have a pratu klal, maybe it's the opposite. Whereas yihachi afilu betraying yana says more. If so, if you have such a kasha, so then even betraying yana, how could you say in mukta mukhar b'Torah? Your kasha is so strong, right? Even how could you say even in two different places in mukta mukhar b'Torah? Right? Shlomo, according to the Mandam, where it says, if you have a klal prat that are distant from each other, you can't. Klal prat only works if it's close to each other. But if it's taking a klal here and a prat here, you can't. That's not called a prat klal, right? Then it makes sense. But according to Mandam, it says you are done, right? So because according to him, you are done a klal here and a prat here, even in Trein Yonim, right? And Trein Yonim, you're telling me in mukta mukhar b'Torah. So then how do you know which one's first? So how could you have a klal prat? So where it says afilu mandar danin, even according to Mandam, who does say danin. That's only in chad inyana, but betraying inyana ain't done. So even though he says that klal pratam ruchakim zemizeh yukedarshan, that's all within one parsha. But no, even he agrees that of course you can't say a klal from one paragraph to another paragraph and prat in another paragraph. Okay. So let's stop here. We'll be mamshech. We'll just finish up this Gemara after Shachris. I'm recording it, so I'll pause it and then.
Thank you. All right. Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you. Good.
Recording. Okay, so we're up to the last shtick on the Vav Amud Beis, where the Gemara talks about now the concept of bittul. Okay, I'm Rabbi Eliyahu Raful. Right, haboidek tzarich shivato. You have it after the two dots. Or you do more. Haboidek tzarich shivato. My timer. So even someone who checks for chametz and gets rid of whatever relevant chametz there is, right? He still has to be mevatel the chametz, which we're saying is kol chamir diko b'shusi, right? After the ar, you have to make it after the ar. Okay, big hak, hefker. Not ever exactly how it works. But the idea is you have to be mevatel. My timing. If it's because there might be crumbs left over that you were not mevatel yet, that you weren't baidik, you weren't able to find, and therefore you're for that you have to be mevatel. Because halach shivi, they're not nechshav anything. They're not called, right? They're not really counted. Right? Maybe you'll tell me, since they are watched and they are protected because they're in the house, therefore they're considered chashav. In regular, obviously, perurim, crumbs, that they're not chashav. It's considered hefker, maybe even, right? If I have crumbs on the street, that's not worth anything. But maybe crumbs that are in my house, I know they're protected. So maybe they're considered chashav. Says if you have a seifei te'enim, which are the end of, like the last figs that are left over in the tree, they never get really ripe, right? However, mishamer sodeyu mipnei anovim. So you have these figs that people don't really care about because they never really get ripe. But you're watching your field, right? But you're not watching it for those. You don't care about those figs really. You're watching them because of the grapes that you have, right? But the point is that it's these te'enim, even though they're not chashuv really to anybody, but they're still being watched by you, right? So what is the halacha in terms of gezel, right? Or if you have seifei anovim, if you have the ends of the grapes, which also weiter don't get so ripe, so no one really cares about that. But because of you have pumpkins there, or other types of cucumbers. Mikshois are kishuin, squashes, whatever, right? So again, both of these things are talking about situations where the fruit that's left over that we're discussing, the seifei te'enim and the seifei anovim, are not so chashuv at all. And you watch, but it happens to be it is being nishtamer because you're watching it for something else, right? So bizman shebal bayis makbid alein. If the bal bayis is makbid, then it's also assumed mishum gezel v'chayavim b'maiser, right? It is chayav b'maiser because you're makbid on it, and it's not hefker. If it's hefker, it's patur from maiser, right? And if it's not hefker, it's chayav b'maiser and it's gezel because he wants it, and it's being mishtamer, right? However, ein bal bayis bizman she'ein bal bayis makbid alein, so mutar mishum gezel mutar mishum maiser, right? So you see something that's not chashav, even though he's watching it. Even the Balbais, it's mishtamer and he's watching it. Since it's not chashav, right, and he's not makbid on it, so it's not considered his. It's considered hefker. It's considered hefker, and therefore, if you take it, you're not stealing, and you take it, you're not chayv in maiser because hefker is patur from maiser. So too over here, these perurim, even though they are washed by the house, right, and it's mishtamer, we don't say that it's hefker, right? So we still say it's hefker, right? Because even though it's mishtamer, right, but if you're not makbid on it, it's nothing. But it's hefker.
It's in the house.
Huh?
It's in the house. It shouldn't be
No. If it's hefker, it's not. Because it's like it doesn't belong to you. Right? Taisus holds the whole idea of bittul is all mitam hefker. It's all like you're mafker. But this is before we get to bittul. We're saying why do you have to be mivatal it? Because if there are still crumbs left over, right, they're yours. It's a problem. The Gemara is saying crumbs aren't anything. Crumbs are hefker. Where it says, what do you mean? If it's being watched out of the house, maybe it's not hefker. The Gemara says, no, even in a situation where something that's not chashiv is watched, if you're not makbid on it, it still blives hefker, and you patur from meiser, and you patur from gezel. Why? Because since it's not chashiv, right? So therefore, it's mamish. Mamish becomes hefker. So therefore, weiter. Why do you need bittul for? Even if there are perurim, it's still hefker. So Amarava says, Rava gzeira shema yimtza gluska yafer. You might find on Pesach, after you did your bedikas and you did everything you should, right? So now comes Pesach, you all of a sudden you find that you missed a spot, right? And you found the gluska yafa, gluska like a fancy cake or something, right? V'daita iluya, and then all of a sudden you say, ooh, wow, maybe I'll eat this, right? So even though it's Pesach, right? So now if there's no daita iluya, so there's no problem. Meaning if, let's say you did bedika before Pesach and you did everything you can, and it happens to be you missed something, right? So you would be pater. You take it and you burn it, no problem, right? But what's the problem? The problem is that you might be chas. Rashi says you might say right, and that second is when you'll be over BeiRav, right? But if you find something on Pesach and you burn it right away, no problem. That's not a problem. You did bedika, you did what you had to, and it's fine, right? However, if you sit there for a second and you fantasize about eating this, right? So that's when you're over BeiRav. That's when you stick to BeiRav, right? So therefore, that's why you need to be mevatel it, right? It says the Gemara, why do you need to do bittul right after bedika, right? Just if you find the gluska, then you should be mevatel it, right? And the idea is the way you have to explain Rashi is that if I tell you go burn it, so by the time you burn it, you might say, it's geschmack, maybe I'll keep it around. Then you're over bal yamatzeh, right? But if I tell you to mevatel it right away, so there's no problem. There's no chash that he's going to end up wanting it. He's a shemer Torah mitzvahs, right? So he's so the Gemara says, the Gemara says, maybe we're talking about a case where he's going to find it after it's asur already, meaning on Pesach itself, and at that point, it's not in his rishus anymore. Once Pesach comes around, it's not really in your rishus, and therefore you can't be mevatel matz and maftel. What does this mean? The two things that are not really considered yours, and the pasuk makes it ki'ilu it's in your rishus. Bar b'shus harabim. If you have a bar b'shus harabim, right, you go into rishus harabim and you dig a pit, right, and you didn't cover it or you uncovered it, right? Is it yours? It's not yours. It's public property, right? But still, if now behemoth falls in, you chayev, right? What does that teach you? That even though it's not yours, it's not your property, you're still responsible for it as if it's yours, right? So bar b'shus harabim is one of the things that einan b'shus shel adam va'asa'on akasav kilu b'shus lei, right? The chametz mishei shayisul mala, and also if you have chametz from 6 hours and on, right? Weiter, it's an isser hana. We learned that yesterday that the isser of chametz is from the erev Pesach chatzos, right? At that point, not only is it also to eat, it's also behana. Also, isser hana is not considered yours. That's a yisoid in Kol Torah Kol that isser hana is not really considered yours. It's not shaloi. And since Isser Hana is not yours, right? Therefore, how could you ever be over bal on Pesach? It's a catch-22. Torah says not to have chametz on Pesach. Chametz on Pesach is Asur B'Hana. How could I? It's not mine. Once it's Asur B'Hana, it's not mine anymore. So, right? So chatzos comes. Let's say I don't do b'dika, I don't do bittul. How am I ever chai for bal matzav? Once chatzos comes, it's Asur B'Hana. Once it's Asur B'Hana, it's not mine. It's only Asur if it's mine. It's catch-22. So the Gemara says, "Nain." That's one of the things that even though it's not really yours, the Torah makes believe it's yours. It's not really yours. The Torah makes believe it's yours as if
Just to be over.
Just to be over, we make it yours. Regarding being over bal yirah, that's when it's yours, right? So therefore, the Gemara says, bittul is a function of bailos. You can only make something like after the ara if it's yours. You can only make something hefker if it's yours, right? But if it's not yours, so you can't really make hefker, right? So therefore, the Gemara says that once it's also you can't do bittul, and therefore, if the chash is since there's a chash, you might find something on Pesach, right? And you say, what do you mean? Be mevatel it right away? No, you can't be mevatel on Pesach because on Pesach it's also no, it's not really yours. Okay, says the Gemara v'nivtalei ba'arba, v'nivtalei b'chomesh. So why do you have to do bittul right after b'dika? He says which means that right after b'dika's chametz on the evening before, that's when you have to do bittul. What do you mean? Do it on the 4th hour, the 5th hour? Where it says given the lavzman isuruhu, lavzman biuru, since it's not the zman isur and it's not the zman biur, it's not a defined time. It's not. You'll still add eat chametz, right? The lavzman biur, it's not the time that you have to burn chametz. It's not tchilas sheish, right? So dil mepasha v'lo mevatale. So therefore, you might forget because it's not a defined time. It's a random time, right? So. Right? Why would he remember? He might remember. He might forget to do bittul. V'nivtala b'shir, says the Gemara. So let him do it at the 6th hour when it's ready also to eat chametz, right? So just like at the beginning of the 6th hour, that's when we tell you it's also to eat chametz, and that's when we tell you that you have to start burning your chametz, right? The Gemara says no, but so do it then. That's a defined time, right? Why would he forget? Because when we do it then also, right? The Gemara says no. Kaven d'isur d'Rabbanan luik. Since there's an issa d'Rabbanan, it's k'deraisa damya v'lav b'shusei kai v'loy matzim b'vatalei. Right? The idea is since it's an issa d'Rabbanan, since the Rabbanan instituted an issa hana from the beginning of the 6th hour, right? So therefore, with the Rabbanan, it's not yours, and therefore with the Rabbanan, you can't be mevatalei. Therefore, you want to be mevatalei from the night before, right? The Amar of Gidol, Amar of Chia Barav, right? Amar of Yisrael, Makadosh Mishei Shaisel Mala, right? Afilu b'chitei kordinaisa ein choshin l'kedushin, right? If someone's Makadosh from 6 hours and on, even bechite kordinisa, which is the type of hard wheat, which even if it's wet, it doesn't really become chametz deraisa. It's called chametz nuksha. It's not really midaraisa, right? So therefore, it's derabanan dika chametz still in choshin l'kedushin, right? Why? Because midarabanan it's not yours. So midarabanan it's right. This is a big sugya in the whole shas in general. How do the rabbanans affect their rice? So the rabbanan said it's not yours, right? Does that mean that if I take that right now, midaraisa, it's mine. Midarabanan, it's not mine. What does that mean? So if I take it now, I'm mekadesh and isha with it. Is it my mammon? Is it not my mammon? Right? So Zak the Gemara over here, name, it's not your mammon. Right? Because the Rabbanan have a koyach of hefker, bezdin hefker. Right? And anything, because they're the bezdin, they have the jurisdiction to decide property, even if it doesn't fully fit with the Torah. The Torah gives them that power. Right? That they could just say, it's not yours, shine, Bezdin's taking it away from me, knas or whatever. They could just take, they have that power. And therefore, Hefker, Bezdin, Hefker, since the Rabbanan say, right, that it's not yours, so therefore it's not yours, and Kaddish Isha not. So it's over here, the Rabbanan said it's not your chametz, because it's already Asr B'Hana, so therefore you can't be Mevatel it. Okay, then the Gemara continues. You have time, we could finish. Finish? Okay. Right, so, says the Gemara, Basar Isura, Loi Matzim Mavtele. After the Zman Isra, you're not allowed to be Mevatel. Is that true? Vatanya, Yoshev, the base matters, you're sitting in the base matters, you remember that there's chametz in your house, Mevatel Beliboy. What do? You Mevatel Beliboy. Well, that's the word it's going to talk about. Right? Vatanya, Yoshev, the base matters, Mevatel Beliboy. You Mevatel Nias. Echad Shabbos, ve'echad Yantif. Whether it's Shabbos or Yantif. Right? So the Gemara says, Bishlam Shabbos, Mishkachas La. Right, so Shabbos, how are you being Mevatel on Shabbos? Oh, because Erev Pesach, which is Arba Asar, is Chal Yais B'Shabbos. So Erev Pesach, like this year, that Erev Pesach is Chal Yais B'Shabbos, right? So therefore, what do? You're in the base medrash on Shabbos, right? And you remember you have Chametz, you're Mevatel it. Elo Yomtiv, Basar Yisurahu, right? Yomtiv, it's already Asar. How could you Mevatel? The Gemara says Mevatel B'Liboy, right? How can you Mevatel B'Liboy? And Yomtiv, it's already Pesach, right? So Amar Bacha Bar Yankiv, Hacha b'Talmud Yeshel Lifnei Rabbi Askina. Right, we're talking about a Talmud that's Yeshel Lifnei Rabbi. He's not just sitting in the base madrash and learning; he's actually sitting in front of his Rebbe. The Nizkar Sheish Isam Migulgeles B'Seich Beisai. Avad it's on Yom Tif, but he remembers that there's a dough that was just mixed in his house, right? He's making matzah on Pesach. He's making matzah, right? Therefore, he made the dough on Pesach. It's not chametz yet, right? So, since it's not chametz yet, right? So therefore, he's allowed to be mevatel it because it's not chametz yet, right? Chametz on Pesach, once it's chametz, it's not yours anymore. It's also about no, so you can't be mevatel it. But this Isa, which is becoming chametz, and you remember as Oyvei, we left it 18 minutes, right? We have 18 minutes for it to become chametz. So you remember as Oyvei, I left the dough, right? I didn't. Now it's going to become chametz, right? So what does he do? He says, I'm going to be mevatel it now. It's not chametz yet. I have a koyach to be mevatel because right now it's not us about no yet. The only reason why you can't be mevatel on Yom Tov is it's already us about no, but now it's not chametz yet, right? So you see, I'm even allowed to be mevatel something that's not chametz yet, right? So therefore, kadum mevatel it mikamid dachmas before it becomes chametz. Dekanami diktani ho yoshev b'sech beis hamedrash mamina. Right? It says Yoshev B'Sech Beis Medrash. Why does it say Yoshev B'Sech Beis Medrash? Right? Why is the case that he's sitting in the Beis Medrash? Right? Must be the idea is that he can't get there. The idea is that he can't go because he's sitting with B'fnei Rabbi, and therefore he can't just go bake it before it becomes chametz or get rid of it before it becomes chametz. That's why he has to mevatel believe. Right. Okay. Beseder Shkoyach. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Great Shabbos.
Tov. If he wasn't, right, if it was chametz gomer and it's regular bittul, so then what does it have to do with sitting in the base matter? Sit here, sit there. It's chametz gomer, and we say you have to be mevatel it, to be mevatel it, right? Right, but what shaykh is sitting in the base matter? Chad is no, it's not chametz yet. You're sitting